I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. People have been asking for my next guest, who was a former assistant secretary of housing back in the Bush 41 years. She managed a $300 billion portfolio. She is a financial expert extraordinaire. You get ready to be red pilled. We're talking to Catherine Alston Fitts. I mean, I was just telling her in the pre-interview, I sit there and listen to her. I just go, man, I'm stupid. But
No,
but
you're
anyway,
not.
let's start with the pandemic, which I've been recording doctors and reporting on doctors, good ones around the world, saying, hey, the numbers just aren't there. We don't have these massive deaths. We don't have all this. Now we find out the hospital ship in New York Harbor has 3 patients on it. Here we
Right.
have Andrew Cuomo saying we're going to need tens of thousands of beds and all these respirators and all this, and that's just not happening. And all these deaths, that's not
So,
happening.
so here's a
So go
question.
ahead.
Andrew Cuomo was instrumental in engineering the housing bubble when he was Secretary of HUD, and then he was instrumental in helping the missing money go missing from HUD. So why is Andrew Cuomo somebody that we would listen to about anything?
Yeah. He wants to be president, and he may have lifted it already, but he's saying that you can only get hydroxychloroquine at the hospital. You can't get it from your pharmacy. I mean, it's a
So
lupus
we
drug.
had a wonderful subscriber this week when, after I listened to the reports, she went down on her bicycle and filmed Bellevue and Beth Israel. Nobody there. Emergency rooms empty. Nobody standing in line. Nothing going on. The only thing dying at these hospitals was their cash flow.
Oh my goodness. So you think? I mean, yes, there is some people that who have diabetes and health concerns and older, and I don't wish anybody to die, and I don't
Right, right.
I don't want to sound cruel or harsh, but we were told, hundreds of thousands, maybe a couple of million would die in the United States, and that ain't happening.
So here's the question, Greg, because I call them plandemics. We've had a pandemic every year. We had one in 2004, then one in 2008 during the financial crisis, and then every election year since we've had one. It's a remarkable coincidence. 2008, 2010, 2012, 2014, 2016, 2018, and now, 2020. So every election year, and this one they've managed to really get global. Now, here's my question. We talk about this as though it's one thing. We talk about what happened in Wuhan as though it's the same thing that happened in Italy, is the same thing that is happening in New York. And I don't know that, because I don't think, if you look at the way a natural virus might work, as one person said, it just shut down 85 countries in basically a few days. Natural viruses don't work that way. So something else is going on here. I think something did happen in Wuhan. Something is clearly happening in Italy. The question is what? But it's a mistake to talk about this as though it's sort of one thing, because what we're dealing with is a complex phenomenon. If you look at the financial patterns, we're dealing with a covert war. And the question is, will it go hot? So one of my questions is what they're doing with the hospitals in New York, really a way of getting hospital capacity set up in case the war goes hot.
Well, one of the things that happened, and I brought this up on a couple of weeks ago on my weekly news wrap. Actually, somebody in the briefing asked Trump about it, and he got a little hinky on it. They made Maduro they deemed him a narco terrorist, and they put bounties out on his staff, and of course, this is what they did with Noriega just before they invaded.
Right. So we saw at the end of 2019, the world was really separating between China and what I would call the de-dollarization crowd, which was the oil producers, including Russia, and the United States. And the dollar syndicate was in real trouble at the end of 2019. You had all the investment advisors saying, S&P over, time to leave the dollar, time to leave the S&P and rebalance into the emerging markets. So you saw the dollar really coming down and the de-dollarization crowd building some real momentum throughout 2019. And then all of a sudden Wuhan happens and whoops, the emerging market is back in the dollar bear trap and the dollar's looking much stronger. So if you watch the financial patterns, you clearly have tremendous tension. Remember, what was one of the things that kept the false prosperity in America going, it was the China trade. And we see the administration renegotiating the trade deficit essentially with China all year long in 2019. And one of the things that is happening as a result of the pandemic is we're watching a dramatic decrease in imports, right? And a dramatic need for importing oil. And my question is, is this, is the trade war going to a whole new covert level? And is the petrodollar at a point where the pressure to attack Iran and Venezuela is clearly on? Remember when I told you the problem wasn't collapse, the problem was going to be war? And that's the question here. How close are we to going to war with Iran, and how close are we going to war with Venezuela? And if we do, does that mean Russia or China comes in?
That's what you have long said, which is what this means. This says, will the dollar collapse or will the economy? So that's a military question.
Well, I don't think the dollar would collapse.
You've always said it's a military question, but go ahead.
Right. This is a military question. The dollar continues to be dangerous and dominant. But here's the thing. If you look at all the things, we've been printing massive amounts of dollars. And if you look at all the things we did to stop that from turning into, high-speed debasement and unprecedented inflation, we've kind of run out of tricks. And the people who run the dollar syndicate have been using sanctions and all sorts of dirtball, hardball to try and keep the price of the dollar floating. But inflation is really sneaking up. And so my question is basically shutting down the small business and small farm economy at high speed the way they've done, is that protecting us from going up a frightening inflation? Are we at Weimar public kind of inflation rates? That's why I'm telling, I've been telling my subscribers and you for 2-3 years, plant, because the price of food is going to go through the roof. And I think one of my questions on what's pressing for war is the debt spiral up and the inflation spiral up is more than they can handle.
You're also talking about how these guys they're running out of tricks for controlling it, and you're saying that this is really just more control in a test for war.
Well, you've got several things going on at once, so let's sort of break it down. First, you have the relationship between the U.S. and China. For 20 years now, the China trade has subsidized the American way of life. So Americans go down to Walmart, they buy Chinese goods, they do it with government checks that are financed by the Chinese buying treasuries. So you had this circular relationship between China and the United States that by shipping our manufacturing to China, we brought the price down, kept the deflation off, labor deflation offset the monetary inflation. Now, China suddenly said 2 years ago, rather than financing your purchases at Walmart, what we're going to do is we're going to invest in the Silk Road and building the train tracks to Europe, cutting out the United States. So now instead of somebody financing our false prosperity, they're setting themselves up to be a competitor. And now they're not buying treasuries, but we continue to go down to Walmart and buy Chinese goods. And that's the pain on the trade deficit that you've seen the president and his trade and finance team grappling with. How are we going to finance the China trade if China's not buying our treasuries and instead is using their profits from that trade to basically build out a land empire, which is serious competition to us, not to mention build out the military capacity they need in the South China Sea to basically cut out the American hegemon in the sort of the Asia region. So that puts the dollar in the squeeze. Now, what has the dollar done? Since 2008, we've lent dollars all over the world, including enormous amounts of dollars in China and Asia, trying to throw everybody and keep them dependent on the dollar, keep them coming from the dollar. That's why I keep talking to you about the possibility of a bear trap. If China's income is suddenly down, but they owe us dollars and dollars are scarce, it's going to be supportive of the dollar. So I think we saw the president in China, the U.S. and China trying to sort out the trade deficit. But now all of a sudden, the pandemic has us, it looks to me like, in a very win-lose position, because we saw at the end of last year, Putin at the BRICS basically saying the dollar's going to implode, the dollar's going to fall apart. We saw Macron in September saying to the diplomats, the unipolar world has failed. We saw Mark Carney and Jackson Hole, the head of the Bank of England, basically saying the world will not tolerate being forced to use the dollar. So the petrodollar standard, which involves Iran and Venezuela, we've kept everybody in the dollar two ways. One is if you do a transaction anywhere in the world in a dollar, we take the position that that gives us jurisdiction over your company, your business, your transaction. That's number one. But number two, we've tried to keep all the oil sales in the world going through the dollar. And of course, that's put everybody back into our jurisdiction. The world doesn't want to do that anymore. They want to be free to trade. And you see more and more central banks around the world doing swap lines and direct relationship central bank to central bank to try to do what's called de-dollarization. So you have this competition of a world, and it's mostly the BRICS who are growing, and China and Asia are growing, who want to basically move outside of our currency and our channel, and you have the Anglo-American alliance trying to protect the dollar syndicate, and that's part of the economic war that's going on.
Is this why you're seeing people like Marsha Blackburn? I think she's from your state, senator from Tennessee. Aren't you in Tennessee? Yes.
Yeah.
Well, not now. I mean, you're in Europe right now. So, I mean, I want to talk to you about that too, about what it looks like over there. But
right.
She says that that China should cut our debt. We have a 1.1 trillion in treasuries, and other people are saying they need to pay reparations for this causing this global pandemic and all this. China, of course, I want to be fair. China says that this is just laying the blame elsewhere and that we didn't cause this pandemic. Although, WHO, the World Health Organization, covered up.
Greg, I would love to know what happened in Wuhan, but I don't think we know.
I mean, there are many either
possibilities of what happened, and
we can't trust anybody.
Here's the thing: if you look at the amount of investment,
I'll come back. So, what do you make of Marsha Blackburn saying they need to cut our debt? I mean, that's like war talk, isn't it?
Well, it's yes, that's war talk. So if you look at all the different fighting covertly and overtly between China and the United States right now, to me, this is getting very dangerous. So, for example, you have China encouraging or forcing the foreigners in China to leave or not come, and you have massive amounts of foreign investment in China. But all those foreign-owned factories and operations are being run by Chinese locals. If this continues, what are the dangers that ultimately those get taken over and controlled by China? You're talking about Western companies, both European and U.S., having to write off trillions of dollars. We see a real effort to get Chinese companies to go public in Hong Kong, leave London and New York. So you're really watching that. We have talk of the internet coming apart. Whether it's the digital systems, the financial systems, or the capital markets, you're really beginning to see a tear in the fabric between the two areas. And the question is, right now it's going on covertly. And, I think the covert war has gotten pretty hot in certain respects. The danger is it goes to something overt. Now, it's unlikely that the U.S. and China would go to war in the first blush. It's going to be through proxies. But essentially what Venezuela and Iran it's a proxy. Remember, China's trying to build out the Silk Road, and that's a land empire that goes from China and a rising Asia to the wealthiest consumer market in the world, the European Union. And if you build the land empire and cut the Anglo-American alliance out, then you've dramatically shifted the balance of power globally. And so it's the land empire in Eurasia, which is sort of war domain number one. It's been covert. That's part of what's been going on with Iran and Ukraine. The second war domain is space, so who's going to be dominant in space? And then the third sort of war fighting space is digital systems. And that's what the 5G back and forth between the president and the Chinese and the Huawei fight is about. So the question is, who's going to control the back door? Who's going to control the one-way mirror into all of our data and lives? And with because remember, 5G is not a classic cellular technology. 5G was invented by the Israelis and the Americans for crowd control. And of course, one of my big questions is part of what's being attributed to a coronavirus literally, are we watching people be poisoned or targeted by 5G? There's a phenomenon in the United States called targeted individuals, and Europe too, targeted individuals. People are being electronically harassed and even assassinated electronically. And the question is that part of what's in play here? Was it part of what's in play with Wuhan? Because we know China had a real problem with people in Wuhan protesting the pollution. Wuhan is one of the most polluted cities in the world.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So if you look at the pollution, plus China just mandated vaccines, and then you look at 5G, one of my questions or series of questions is, are we looking at the interaction between some of the nanoparticles and heavy metals and vaccines with 5G, with the pollution? You're talking about an enormous cocktail of toxicity, which is certainly capable, I believe, of killing people.
I want to move, who knows? And then the other thing is just so much we don't know. I mean, we can see enough to where people like you can say,
well,
this is pretty scary.
Here's the thing, because, Greg, I watch the financial patterns. If you looked at where things were at the end of 2019, the dollar was in real trouble. And then all of a sudden, Wuhan happens, and actually the Chinese lockdown started in November, and it's a miracle. It completely shifted the flows in the financial markets, and suddenly the dollar is stronger than ever, and treasuries are stronger than ever.
Even though they're sub 1%.
It was a miracle. It was a coincidence, a coincidental miracle.
Yeah, even though the treasuries are sub 1% now. I mean, it's like, 0.6 or 0.7% for 10-year
As of Wednesday, treasuries, the long treasury ETF was up 23% for the year. I mean, who ever heard of the long treasury market making you 23% in 3 months?
Yeah, there's no intervention or manipulation there, is there? She laughs.
It's all extraordinary.
She laughs. I want to talk about Bill Barr, and I've come to the conclusion for a long time, maybe I got soaked on the opium, but there were some of my ardent critics, commenters, thoughtful commenters, not just trolls. And they said, we don't think anybody will ever spend a day in jail. And I thought, oh, no, that couldn't happen. Well, it looks like it's happening. I mean, here you have a Durham who's going after some dope that, made some threat to Adam Schiff. He's got time for that, but he doesn't have time for an international coup that tried to take down a duly elected president with false documents from the other campaign and false FISA applications to spy on his campaign and his presidency. They don't have time for that, but they got time for some dope that threatens Adam Schiff, which he shouldn't be threatened. But they got time for that. I mean, Durham, the Barr, Epstein died. As soon as Epstein, I thought, oh my gosh, Epstein died in the second attempt for suicide, and Dr. Bodden is like, oh no, I'm 99% sure he was choked. Anyway,
the problem if you are the Attorney General. So you run an economy which has been levitated. I go back to the old Red Button story, and for anybody who doesn't know the Red Button story, you can look it up on the internet and watch my little video. But we have levitated the standard of living in the United States with a variety of different mechanisms, one of which was the China trade, and the other of which I'll describe as blowing bubbles and playing lots of games, and we can dive in and talk about that. But basically, the whole thing, whether it's the China trade or blowing the bubbles, is long in the tooth. So the question is, how are you going to keep the red button levitating? And the reality is, if you pick a fight with all the different financial interests that have helped you blow the bubbles, or helping you blow the current bubbles, or helped you engineer a financial coup d'etat, then you don't have time to manage all the different fights you're having globally. You're going to have a big fight internally, and the whole thing's going to implode. So if you're the attorney general, the question is, do you keep the cash flows going or do you enforce the law? Because at this point, the entire economic model is operating outside the law.
Yeah, with the secret money, the FASB, FASAB 56 rule, we don't. It's a
Right.
national security issue.
I think they created FASB 56 to try and bring more of the money. You know, if you pass a law that says anything goes, then it's a lot easier to keep everything legal. But, and you know, I've always told you, I could have told Epstein that the minute they passed FASB 56, he was a dead man. I mean, that was like that, because the whole Clinton Foundation, Weinstein, Epstein laundering operation, you don't need it anymore. You can do the low fee alternative through FASB 56.
Everything's a national security issue.
If you look at how expensive it was to manage Weinstein, Epstein, the Clintons, that whole operation, you know, that was very fee intensive, Greg. So they've gone to the, you know, think of FASB 56 as the low budget alternative. But now with the financial coup over, you want to consolidate. And the question is, do you re-engineer or you cut and run? That's something we need to talk about. But you don't need all those folks. And so you're cleaning them out. You're consolidating. You've had a financial coup. You've stolen $50 trillion. Now you're consolidating. And the question is, you know, how are you going to go forward? Are you going to do a re-engineer of the remaining governmental structure? Are you going to do a cut and run and let it implode?
So you don't need the extortion racket of Epstein with the you know, his pedophile islands and cameras in every room and, you know, all that. You don't need the global charity fraud of the Clinton Foundation.
So I think,
which was started, incidentally, this is why you know about this. People don't realize this. You know, you were Assistant Secretary of HUD. And so this is something you know about because you managed a big portfolio. And you said the Clinton Foundation got started with basically HUD money.
That's my guess. Now, I can't prove
That's a pretty good guess for somebody that was Assistant Housing Secretary.
Right.
I'm guessing.
Confident that the initial capitalization of the Clinton Foundation came out of the money disappearing from HUD under Secretary Andrew Cuomo.
And she laughs again. Yes, there's no coincidence.
Well, you know, it's so funny. You have no idea how funny it is. Here's a guy who engineered the housing bubble. Then he engineered the missing money from HUD.
Helped.
And now I have New Yorkers telling me, oh, wouldn't he make a great president? It's like, you know, it's like the Men in Black have a neuralizer and they're
I mean, it's outrageous. He's incompetent. I mean, he's incompetent in terms of actually helping people. He's very competent in stealing money, apparently, and hiding money and, you know, being a politician.
Oh, it was really funny. You know, his brother supposedly has the COVID-19. And published, there was an article in the New York Post where Chris Cuomo was talking about how he'd suffered all night long and had hallucinations and ran a fever of 103.
And chipped his tooth.
So I tweeted it out and said, you know, Chris Cuomo lives on Park Avenue. I don't feel sorry for him. I feel sorry for all the people, thanks to the Cuomo policies, that are homeless tonight in New York.
Yeah, I mean, it's awful. I mean, and so you think that we're getting a dress rehearsal for control, some type of war. This is way more than this because it's a hoax. I mean, the hospital ship.
Well, let's step
three
back.
people on it in New York.
Let's step back and look at where the dollar syndicate wants to go.
Yeah.
So the important thing to understand, Greg, about where many of them, it's not everybody, but where many of them would like to go, they want to end currency.
Paper currency, folding,
right
money
now
clips.
We have a currency system.
Yeah.
You put $1 in your pocket, I put $1 in my pocket. Your dollar and my dollar have the same value because they function in a market. It may be rigged, it may be influenced, it may be manipulated, but we can put $1 in our pocket and walk away and trade it without going through a digital mechanism. If you move to crypto, and I just want to really underscore this, crypto is not a currency. It's a control system. So you move to a crypto and you're on the company system and you have a credit at the company store. And if you have a crypto and I have a crypto, your crypto can be arbitrarily taken away or changed in value if you don't behave. It's not a currency. It's a credit at the company store. And it's one that is not that is not your asset. That is a credit at the company store. It's an asset of the company, and they can take it away or change its value like that. Now, if you look at the current currency, it's on a petrodollar standard. So it used to be on a gold standard, and it went to being on a petrodollar standard after the Nixon shock broke the gold standard. Now they're talking about a credit system on the company store that will have as its collateral a human being. So you see Bill Gates come out with tech, with ID 2020. So every human being has a biometric ID, and that can be tied with the currency system. We can talk about how that may or may not happen. But they're talking about changing from an oil standard to human standard, and where I come from, we call that slavery. So where the dollar syndicate wants to go is what you and I know as Christians as mark of the beast. This is moving into a mark of the beast system, which is not a currency system, it's a control system. So it's the end of currencies, is what they're proposing.
In some way, shape, or form. We don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but that's what they're working towards.
Well, if you look at the planning and the design and the competition, it's fluid right now. There's competition over what the design will be. It was very interesting. I won't bore you with all the details, but I had an incredible experience in Denmark a year ago, and I was trying to figure out what's going on in Denmark. They had one of the tech firms in Denmark was being paid by the U.S. Navy to come up with a chip that could be implanted in the human body that would integrate with Ripple. Yeah. So Ripple is a crypto, and it's one that's gotten a lot of promotion from the American establishment, in my experience, just my impression. So why is the U.S. Navy paying a Danish tech company to come up with an implantable chip that will integrate with Ripple? Exactly.
You're telling me that all these small businesses have crashed, and now they're going to loan them money. And you said this in the pre-interview, and you just said, "Wow, what an extortion racket! What a money, what a loan sharking operation." Could you explain what's going on with all these small businesses? We have the labor market's 10 million people.
When I worked in the Bush administration, one of the things I got an incredible education is the extent to which a government contractor loan allows the government, in terms of audit, enforcement, and regulation, to really get deeply in your business. Okay, so if you do a deal, it's like doing a deal with the sheriff of Nottingham. You give them a real avenue into all your data, all your knowledge. And the ability to run up a hell of a lot of compliance and accounting fees. Having litigated with the federal government over one contract for 11 years, it took me 36,000 free hours, unpaid hours, and $6 million. So anyway, so I'm watching millions of small business and proprietorships all over the country being shut down by the new travel and quarantine restrictions. And as that happened in the stimulus bill, so you see the Fed and Wall Street helping hedge funds out, in very short notice. What do they offer to all the small businesses being shut down on Main Street? They offer loans. Well, the small businesses on Main Street don't need loans. They need profits, right?
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So they offer loans. Well, then the terms, I get an email yesterday from somebody proposing the loan to me. Well, I got two emails. One was from somebody encouraging investment advisors to promote the loans. And apparently they're offering the banks that do it 1% to 5% fees. So if you borrow $250,000 on a small SBA loan, the bank gets a 5% fee. Are you ready for this? Guess what the interest rate they were offering? 5.75%. So the New York Fed member banks can borrow at the Fed window for 0 or 1 to 0%. but so they can borrow using my federal credit at 1 to 0%, but then they lend me my own money at 5.75% and get a 5% fee.
Wow.
Is that not amazing?
Amazing.
Now it gets
Loan
even
sharking
better.
fraud. The
Why should I
stimulus.
borrow $250,000 loan from my federal credit that I'm liable for when the federal government is missing $21 trillion, which works out to $65,000 a person? So if you're a small business guy with a family of four, that's $250,000.
Yeah.
Why shouldn't the government just give you your $250,000 back?
Yeah. Because they stole it.
Right.
And
So
this, and just so people know, the missing money.
We're handing out pure equity gifts to insiders, and God knows what's going on in the back door of the BlackRock Fed portfolio. So you're handing out gifts or zero interest loans to the insiders, and you're also giving them insider information. I don't know if you saw after the members of Congress got the briefing about the lockdown that was coming. Pelosi and her husband apparently bought $5 million of Amazon stock and have made a fortune on it. Just
unbelievable. It really is quite unbelievable. I mean, they're going after the senators that sold their stocks, but the people that bought, like Pelosi, how much did Amazon stock go up? What percentage was that? One of the few stocks that went up.
It's Amazon is going to benefit tremendously from the centralization of purchases. So here's the thing, Greg. The leadership has a very tricky job or the dollar syndicate, I'll say, has a very tricky job of competing globally on the global stage vis-a-vis the de-dollarizers. And that's very sensitive. It could turn dangerous. It could turn hot. It's a very dangerous situation. So it's not an easy job if you're the president's team managing that. That's number one. But in the meantime, whatever happens on the global stage, it means the days of the subsidy that kept the game going inside America is over. And so the question is, how do you radically reduce the financial footprint in a way that stops inflation from going wild? How do you take the subsidy away from the American middle class without a major civil war? So there are two dances going on. One is the global competition dance, and then the other is lowering the expectations of the population. In the 1990s, if you read my Dylan Reed online book, I explained there was a group of us who were saying, with globalization coming, it's going to wipe out the middle class. We need the middle class to improve their skills, pay down their debt, and jump the curve so they don't get wiped by this. And that was our proposal. The decision was made to reject that, instead blow bubbles. And so what we did is we did the China trade and we blew bubbles, and everybody in America said, fine, we'll go along. Well, this is the price. You've borrowed from the future and now it's over. But again, they have two dances. How do you work out the global competition? And while you're working out that model, how do you let the footprint in America drop in a way that stops inflation from taking off? And what they apparently have decided to do is basically roll up all the small business income and pull it into the big guys and bankrupt the country.
Oh my God.
Well, let me just say that's their plan. There are other opportunities. And let me tell you the good news on this. If you look at the technology that is available to be rolled out over the next 10 years, whether it's life extension technology or breakthrough energy, we're talking about incredible wealth that can be created by new technology. And the real argument here is, not are we or do we need to descend into poverty? But the question is, they want the money to pay for building out space, and you have a lot of baby boomers who want the money for retirement. And there's a real tension between the black budget boys and the retirement of promises to the boomers. And, there's a tug of war about that. And the missing money is at the heart of that tug of war. But there's plenty of reason for a very positive economic future if you can get the governance and the culture to play win-win. I mean, right now we're stuck in a win-lose relationship increasingly with China and the emerging markets, and then we're stuck in a win-lose relationship between the leadership and ourselves. But if you look at the fundamental economics, there is a way to go win-win. The problem our leadership has is there's no way to get to win-win without becoming transparent. And you have an entire model of people who are totally addicted to secrecy. And the last thing they want to do is expose all the criminal liabilities that will come out if transparency occurs. So the swamp does not want to go transparent, let alone get into a win-win position, because they may no longer control. If you stay secret and keep everybody dumbed down, you can keep in control. The problem is, if you're going to compete on the global stage, it would be good to have your general population behind you.
Yeah. And is this win-lose situation why people smell something? They don't know exactly what's wrong, but they know something's wrong. They're going to the gun stores in record numbers. Record numbers of guns are being sold. They're trying to tamp that down in states like New York and New Jersey and, I don't know, Illinois and, the real blue states, California. They're trying to tap that down, trying to have sheriffs come out and say, we're going to stop gun sales during this COVID-19 pandemic hoax. And
I just want to say 3 cheers for the LA gun stores who refused to shut down. The sheriff finally had to reverse it and say, okay, you can stay open.
Well, because it was a constitutional issue. And he's not the king. He's not King Tut. He's a sheriff. You don't get to go and say, okay, I'm the sheriff. I'm going to take away your constitutional rights. You can't do that. But people are arming up in record numbers. Is this part of the reason why that is? People know there's something wrong, but they don't unless they listen to you. They don't know quite what's wrong.
So here's what I think they understand. They understand that the rule of law is steadily being diminished. They see all sorts of behavior, whether it's in the general population or by various governments or the federal government, that is lawless. And, so they're watching the sheriff of Nottingham roam, but they're also watching people in poverty who think, okay, well, anything goes. And if anything goes for the big guys, anything can go for us.
And they're letting all these people out of prison, like Cuomo's letting tons of sex offenders and prisoners out because, he can't get those guys infected with COVID-19. They're letting prisoners out in mass, and they're arresting preachers for having service.
Right. Well, a part of what is happening, and you and I understand this, is we're dealing in a spiritual war. And there are serious demonic and occult forces at work. And there's nothing they would love more than to stop the churches and stop people from getting together and praying and inviting in the divine and angelic hope every Sunday. So, I'm with the president. I think stopping the churches from gathering is a very, very terrible idea.
I'm with you. It's an uber First Amendment violation. Especially
Absolutely.
with this totally COVID. Now you're seeing the numbers again on the hospital ship. Oh, we need 1,000 beds on this hospital ship in New York. Three people. So 3 people are there.
Here's the thing, Greg. If you go back and you look at all the, the pandemics that the pandemics that we've had from 2004 to 2008, every 2 years, every election year on, their defense is always, oh, this is going to hit an exponential curve and it's going to kill everybody.
Yeah, that's what we were told this time.
And it's impossible to fight that, even for doctors and for nurses and very knowledgeable people. You can't prove that is not going to happen.
Until you get enough data where it says, hey, you were wrong. Now they're saying the models were wrong.
And I disagree with that. Because if this is something that can be triggered with vaccines and flu shots or toxicity or chemical or biowarfare, I mean, if this is being intentionally induced by any parties, you can't say it won't go up the curve because they have the ability to turn the curve off and on.
And how about, we'll close with this. For one of the first times, just a few interviews, you were never really that hot on gold. You always said I need enough to, bribe the guards at the at the border and whatever. But you're a core holder of gold. Understand that you like it, but but you changed a couple of interviews ago, a few months ago. I don't know, maybe last year, 2019. Said I think gold is an investment opportunity. Well,
Right.
Shazam! It's up $300 year over year. This is about
Right.
when you said I'm turning. I think it's an investment opportunity. That's a good call. That's a good call. I mean, gold, even though it's not on fire, it didn't go down 35% with the stock market.
Right. But I said the same thing I said, I'll say the same thing I said last time, which is the most important question, investment question before you is where is your food going to come from over the next year?
Yeah.
So if you look in your local area, there is farmland, there are farmers markets, there are farmers who are in trouble because the restaurants have closed.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
need
yeah.
to
I know.
re-engineer their business at high speed. You better get out there and figure out whether you're going to plant it, whether you're going to plant a garden, whether you're going to build a greenhouse, whether you're going to plant an orchard, whether you're going to finance your local farmer, whether you're going to finance your local food co-op. Where's your food going to come up from, and how are you going to lock up fresh, healthy sources of food? That is the most important investment question before you right now.
And gold, would you still be a buyer of gold?
Yep, absolutely. Gold, I think when 2020 is over, gold will have a reasonable investment performance. I think the system will do everything to make sure it's not a great performance. And if we get into a war situation, we could see prices really deflate across the board, all financial and assets and commodities. But I think gold, my expectation is gold will outperform most asset categories this year.
Okay. Catherine Austin Fitz, you are the publisher of the Solari Report. That's right, the Solari Report at solari.com. You have a big thing coming up on currencies, don't you? You told me in the
Right. It's called The State of Our Currencies, and I've delayed publication. And now the subtitle, I think, is going to be, is this the end of currencies?
Wow. And that's coming out.
Crypto is not a currency. It's a crypt.
And that's going to come out when? What's your ballpark for the release date?
It should come out sometime in late May. The hard copy. The PDF should go up early May.
Okay. And that's, solari.com. Beautiful. I mean, it's a full spectrum. You can get the tech, the actual magazine and read it on the bus or the airplane or whenever that comes back.
We have digital subscriptions and digital plus print. So you only get the print. If you're a digital subscription, you get the quarterlies in the PDF.
Right.
If you are digital and print, then you get the full hard copy magazine mailed to you anywhere in the world.
I'll put that up on the website. It's a beautifully done magazine. I mean, Newsweek and Time and whoever the old legacy magazines are it's like toilet paper. I mean, the information is propaganda.
Yeah.
They don't really want to educate.
Well,
you actually try to educate.
I have a saying all the time. I say beauty is necessary for survival. So a lot of the information we deal with, particularly on the financial side, it's either complex and some of it's pretty dark. So we think it helps if it's in a very attractive, peaceful presentation.
Oh, and I wanted to just before you close, and I just want to bring this up because this was kind of an email string that I was included on. That I just watched it go back and forth. That Dr. Mark Skidmore, a economics professor at Michigan State University, you at solari.com have all this data on your website, and you were the nugget of that there was trillions of dollars that they don't know where it was, and he tried to prove. Well, and he comes up with $21 trillion.
Right.
You have been pushing this idea that they're stealing money. And then the DOD
Well, this
comes
is
out.
why they had to do FASB 56.
That's right, to make it a national security issue that you can't find out. Oh, it's a national security. And then they came out with this bizarre DOD. We overstated our budgets in 2017, 18, and 19 for a sum total of $95 trillion. And Skidmore, who writes me and says, I tried to get the paperwork on that. Basically, I got a press release. There was no OIG reports. There was no accounting. There was no way. They just made it up. And why would
He's
they make?
really done a very faithful
I'm
job of trying to
paraphrasing.
get the DOD to provide the documentation and evidence. And my description of what's been happening is it's just a complete runaround in Stonewall. And because
he scares them. He scares them.
Yes.
He's scaring the daylights out of them because he's a tenured PhD economics real guy at Michigan State University. Even the university wrote about, wow, you uncovered the major accounting scam, basically. But he can't find out anything. He's got.
Well, but here's the problem. You have a national security state which is addicted to secrecy, and they're terrified of that secrecy coming down, because I think if you look at a lot of what's going on underneath the carpet, it's not making us competitive and efficient globally.
Yes, right.
This is not a high performance national security state if you look at what's happening globally.
It's fraud and crime, and opaqueness never makes you a great competitor. Because if you got to resort to fraud and crime, then your business model ain't a good one.
Right. And I think part of the challenge, there have been so many excellent people who've left Washington and left the service of government, whether as political appointees or in the civil service, because of the corruption. And unfortunately, the big fear for me, one of the big fears on war, is we forced a lot of the really competent people out. And that has dramatically weakened the ability of the machinery to perform, whether it's to perform on protecting the dollar or to get the governmental systems to operate correctly. And unfortunately, you see, of course, the pirates like BlackRock moving in to take over, and that's even more dangerous. So it's an exceptionally dangerous corner we've gotten ourselves into.
And with that, I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit more about Skidmore and the money. Again, that's a double out. But anyway, you are the...
Can I just mention one other thing, Greg?
Have at it, because I'm just letting it roll. Because everybody wants to hear what you got to say.
I really want you to take a look at this. On the bailouts, the money would fly out every day. And as I would write or research, I would have to go back and find out, how much was it? One of the things I learned was there was something to be gained by every day collecting up, documenting, and collecting the stories of all the money being, I call it the money shovel. So I learned my lesson on the bailouts, and we started something called the stimulus tracker at Solari. If you come into Solari after you've logged in, you can, in the news, trends, and stories section in the navigation bar, there's something called stimulus tracker, but there's also a graph of a little piggy bank wearing a coronavirus mask on the front of it, and it says stimulus tracker on the bottom of the website, bottom right. And what it does is every day we rack up and collect in a flexible table press that you can manipulate every story of central bank or treasury stimulus all around the Northern Hemisphere. We're picking up some Southern Hemisphere, but it's mostly Asia, Europe, and the United States. And you would not believe the money shovel. It is incredible. So, if you do come to Solari, check out the stimulus tracker. I want you to check out the stimulus tracker, because you are just going to be amazed.
There's no wonder why people are clinging to guns, gold, and the good book, the Bible, because boy, we're in some uncharted waters here. I mean, it's just wow. The
Bible has amazing, excellent advice for our situation.
Yeah. When you look on the map in the olden days, when they didn't know where all the seas ended, it got to the point where there are dragons out there, right? We're getting close to the dragons. So.
Well, here's the thing. If you look at the global competition and then the relationship between the domestic population and the secret national security state, you've got two highly fluid situations that could work out in many different ways. And the question is, with that many people positioned win, lose, there has to be a way to get it back win-win. That's what the Bible says, but it's going to take a lot of prayer.
Yeah. I think I'm beginning to actually clearly see why Jesus has to come back. But anyway, with that, seriously, I mean, who can fix this?
I don't think he left. I think he's still here. So.
Yeah, no, okay. He's always here with us. Anyway, Catherine Austin Fitts, thank you very much for coming on. Publisher of the Solari Report at Solari.com. I'll put the links up after the interview section. Catherine, thanks for giving us almost an hour, 50 minutes of your time. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks, Greg. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, I'm always enlightening, and I still am left with, man, I feel stupid. But anyway, but not after I talk to you. I feel smarter now. But anyway, thank you very much for coming on. Thanks a lot.
Have a great day.
Okay.